and welcome to the Art of Being Human. Today I'm going to be talking about intelligence. IQ stands for intelligence quotient. Now we've been going through the stages of life, and then I've been adding things to it such as adoption and abuse and bullying and things like that. And I decided that the various things that we deal with every day, that people deal with every day, and one of them is their IQ, with their intelligence. How do they handle it? How does it get measured? Supposing you have a group of people, and I want to find out which ones are average, which ones are more intelligent, which ones are less intelligent. Well, how do I do that? Well, I'm going to give you a couple of definitions, 2 or 3 definitions to begin with, and you can kind of get a feel for it, and then I'll go on with it. What is intelligence? Well, I've got different definitions as I've checked this out in different resources, but it's a capacity for learning. Intelligence is a capacity for learning and reasoning and understanding. Now, what is aptitude then? What is the difference between intelligence and aptitude? Well, aptitude kind of figures in, because aptitude is when you're really good at a general kind of thing. Like some people have a good aptitude for mathematics. They do very well in mathematics. I don't. It's one of my weakest points. But that would be an aptitude. I would have an aptitude for the arts. Well, I do a lot of work with the arts. I do a lot of work with music. So aptitude, I'm looking at it. This is my own configuration here. I'm looking at it as certain things that you can have a special ability for, that you really like to do, that you have a special interest in. An aptitude test is different than an IQ test, and there are special tests for aptitude and special tests for intelligence. Now, I'm not going into the test, but by the time a child has graduated from high school, they've taken any number of these tests in their school system anyway. Okay, so what's ability? Ability is kind of like a substructure of aptitude. Ability is the way that you can do some specific thing well, a special talent, a special gift. It could be art, it could be the sciences, it could be mathematics, it could be learning English, it could be an ability to be able to learn languages. I have some of my friends that can speak 7 or 8 languages practically fluently, and to them it's no big deal. They do it all the time. They travel. Oh yes, I'm speaking Spanish. I had one of my friends who was a college professor with me, and although he didn't speak various languages, he could exactly mimic, or it sounded to me like he could exactly mimic the way that they sounded. So he would speak English with a French accent or with an Italian accent. And it was fascinating to his students because he was teaching things like history, and if they were talking about France, he'd speak with his French accent. If they were talking about England, he'd use an English accent. And I don't know how he got the ability to do that, but that's one of his abilities, and I think it's genetic. I think a lot of these things are genetic. So I want to mention one more thing, and that's statistics. Statistics is a type of mathematics, and it's used to categorize, compare things, put things in certain places. It's a special kind of mathematics that's based more on logic than it is on pure math. Now, you use your formulas just like you do if you're in chemistry or physics. There are formulas that you use, and it can get very complicated. But for me, and I'm not a math hound, I don't like math very much. I don't do very well in it. But I find statistics fascinating because you can take groups of people and you can analyze them and put them in certain categories, and it's done all through the mathematics of statistics. Now, when you're in graduate school, and of course I was in graduate school twice for each of my 2 graduate degrees, we had to take statistics. We didn't have to take mathematics, but we had to take statistics because it's used a lot in research. And if I were to research people to find out who belongs in what categories, it would have to be statistics that I use. Now, I don't do research, but I read carefully other people's research, and what they do is they can formulate formulate things, they can generalize things, they can put people in different categories, they can measure the differences between people in terms of their abilities or whatever they're measuring, and they use it a lot. They use it for research, they use it for medical research, say they're going to be working on a new drug. How do people react to this new drug? Is there anything that it's better for than what they think it's good for? Because sometimes they'll study a drug and they find it's good for something else other than what they were studying. And so they have a new drug that can be used in different ways. But they have to have people take it. How do the ages differ? How does a person react to a medication depending upon their age? How much should a person take? How much is too much? How much is not enough? And does it work better with people of certain age groups or people with certain medical conditions, or if you have one thing that troubles you, is that going to interfere with your being able to process the medication? How do they do all of this stuff? Well, they do it with statistics. And if you read the research on drugs, they'll map it out for you. This is what we did. This is the number of people we had in our sample. We studied it on 3,000 people. You've got to have a sample. You've got to have something to study. And you can't study everybody, so you have to take what's a reasonable sample of people in terms of age, sex, and whatever, so you can test it, and then you generalize how it's going to be when you give that drug to the broad public, or to make assumptions on people with 150 IQ are geniuses. How do we know that? Well, we've got to be able to test them, and we've got to be able to find out what their IQ really is. And even though there's going to be a range, say a person is 130 IQ, well, it can be from 120 to 140. I mean, there's a range on either side. But statistics helps you to measure all of this, and I find it fascinating, but I don't do anything with it because I'm not in a situation where I would need to, and I'm not doing research. Nonetheless, I want to make you aware of how it works. So these are the definitions that I want you to have, and we'll go on from here. There is another definition of intelligence that I want you to have that comes from another source. It is the ability to adapt to old or new situations in the environment. Well, how do you do that? That's more social than genetic, isn't it? Well, actually, it's both, and it is a part of intelligence. There are a lot of aspects to intelligence, not just how smart you are, but how you adapt, how smart you are during certain segments, being in certain segments of society, how smart you are in making changes, how smart you are in being able to adapt. That's a whole part of intelligence, too. So the factors in intelligence are these. You have a space factor. Can you visualize things? Can you visualize objects? Can you put your hand in a purse and feel around to make sure you have something in there that you want to take with you? I don't know how many times I've been driving along, because I do a fair amount of traveling around in the state and other states as well. And I'll think, well, did I remember to take such and such? So what do? I put my hand in my purse, which is always beside me, and I feel around. And even though I'm not looking in my purse, I can feel and say, oh yeah, here it is. And I recognize it by touch, even though I'm not looking at it. Or I can see something in the distance, and I know the kind of shape it is, and I know that that's a tree, or that's some kind of an object that I'm not familiar with. I was driving along the other day, and I just jammed on my brakes. There was something in the road. It turned out to be somebody's toy car that they were operating from the side of the road. They had it on a battery system, they had a remote control, and it's weaving around in traffic, a poor place for it to be when there actually is traffic. And the thing was about this big. And all of a sudden it's moving. Well, I didn't see right away where it was moving from, but then I glanced over to the side and I saw the guy with the remote. You know, he shouldn't have had it in traffic with other traffic, so I jammed on my brakes so I wouldn't hit it. But it took me a few seconds to realize what it was. You see something, how long does it take for you to register what it is? If I look at a form, do I know what kind of a form it is? This is all visualization, and it's visualization of things in space. That's a factor in intelligence. Then you have the number factor, being able to do mathematics, having spatial relations in the way that you formulate things, and you can do math and you can do formulas and so forth. That's a part of it. Then there's verbal comprehension. And not only do you hear people speak, but do you know what they're saying? If you read a book and it's technical, do you know what it really means? Could you read the book and then you could put the book down and say, well, this is what I read and this is what it means to me. That verbal comprehension, I understand the words I hear, I understand the words I see, I can formulate what it means, I can take a paragraph and read it and put the book down and say, well, this is what it just said, I can paraphrase it. That's verbal comprehension. And some people are very, very gifted in this, and they have no problems with reading comprehension. But there are some people, you know, who are very good in math, but they're very poor in reading comprehension. You know, Einstein, probably one of the most intelligent people that has ever lived, his IQ was probably about 240, 250, something like that. They have judged it. I don't know how they judge it, but they have judged it. It's not like average intelligence. It's way beyond that. If you have an IQ of, say, 160, you're a genius. My father was a genius. I know. I was the one who tested him, because I was studying all of this in psychology, and he was a very willing subject. He loved to have me use him as one of his samples, and so I did. My father was way above on the intelligence scale, but Einstein was a judge over 200. Most tests don't go up that high, but they can. Some tests can. That's what he would have measured. But he had trouble with reading comprehension. Some people feel that to be a genius, you have to be equally good in everything, equally good in mathematics as you are in verbal comprehension, equally good in every single thing, every single aspect. But I don't feel that way. I think that even in geniuses, there may be something that they have trouble with. Einstein was so good in mathematics and space science and all the things he did. But there were some people when he was young that thought he was retarded because he had trouble understanding sentences that he was reading. So his genius, so high in some areas, did not extend to things like reading comprehension. He had problems with it. But yet he was still probably the smartest person that ever lived. So people can be geniuses, but that doesn't mean they have to be equally as good in every single thing. I haven't met a person who's equally good in every single thing. I know some geniuses. I have some that are friends of mine. I have one, a man who I know quite well, and he is a mathematician, and he is so bright. But when he was in school, he had trouble in reading comprehension. His mathematical abilities were off the chart. I mean, he was going to MIT and all of these tremendous colleges before he was even out of grade school, in understanding it. He could sit in with anybody and tell him anything in terms of math and all of that. But get him to read, and he had some problems. So to be a genius doesn't mean you have to be good in everything. At least from my point of view, there might be others that don't agree with me. So not only verbal comprehensions, but this verbal fluency. Can you speak well? Can you talk at a high level so that people understand where you're coming from, that you can make yourself understandable, so that you can talk about high-level things, say high concepts, difficult concepts? The one thing that retarded cannot do is they cannot seem to grasp things that are beautiful or that are ethereal. And when I mention ethereal, I mean attitudes and things like that. I could take, and I've done it, groups of children who have intellectual problems and take them out and take them for a drive, and we come to a beautiful scene where maybe we're going to have a picnic or something. I say, see how beautiful this is. They don't get it. You know, it's a nice place, there are trees and there's grass, and we're going to eat and we're going to have a picnic. But to understand beauty or to understand intellectual concepts like is democracy, what does democracy mean? What does spirituality mean? The higher things that can't be defined just by words alone. Those kinds of things they do not grasp. But people who have a lot of fluency in language and a lot of ability can grasp it. I'm not saying we have a perfect understanding of it. Nobody has a perfect understanding of everything. But you see how intelligence can be measured according to what kind of areas that you are very smart in. Then there's memory. People who are brilliant are usually memorize well, they remember things. Then there's reasoning. Can you reason out things? Can you say, well, if this means this and that means that? And just do have a lot of reasoning ability and perception, how you see things. Can you perceive things? And so all of these things, number factor, space factor, verbal comprehension, verbal fluency, memory, reasoning, perception, all of these things are important in terms of intellectual functioning. Now, I mention this just because I'm thinking about it, is today on the news, or yesterday on the news, it was reported that somebody was in trouble because they used the word retarded. No one uses that word anymore. Well, I use that word. And a lot of other people use that word. They were trying to say because a person mentioned the R word, in other words, retardation, that somehow they were demeaning. So instead they use cognitive problems or deficiencies in functioning. And you know, why not just use the word retarded, because that's what it is. The word retarded, and we'll be getting into that too, the word retarded is a medical word to describe a person who has deficiencies in their cognitive functioning. And there's nothing demeaning about it. It's saying, like the word cancer, it has to do with people that have abnormal growths that need to be removed, and sometimes it leads to death, but people can also heal from it. So that's not a demeaning word. And I don't think the word like retardation is a demeaning word. It describes something, and it has its medical use. Retardation is a more modern use than the words that they used previous to that, which really were demeaning or became demeaning. As people use a word, it gets more and more common use in society, then it becomes used to demean other people, like saying you idiot or something like that. It used to be, and years ago, and I've read texts on this, where people who are retarded, the medical term from that was idiot. And now, of course, if you use the word that you would be shunned because it is a bad word. But through time, it became a bad word. And retardation may be going down that same path. Yet at the same time, it does describe a situation. To use the word today as idiot, you would be really demeaning somebody, and I would never do it. And it's usually only done when someone wants to demean somebody else. So I don't use that word anymore because I certainly don't want to demean anybody. But retardation is a more modern kind of word, and it does describe people with cognitive dysfunction. It's a lot easier to say than to say cognitive dysfunction every time you want to use something. We will be going into genius, and we'll also be going into what's considered to be normal, and we're also going to go into what's considered to be less than normal, different than normal, for people, say, with mongoloid illness, where they have an extra chromosome which causes them not to have normal functioning. doing, and we'll be going into all of that, because that's what we face every day, and the individuals who are in those situations have to live with that for the rest of their lives. So those are the factors that are in intelligence. Now, I want to show you some charts, and we'll start on this, but I'm not sure that we'll finish it. This is a bell-shaped curve. When we do research, when people do research on people, say, for their height, for their IQ, for, say, even the color of their hair or the color of their eyes, they do research and they come up with a bell-shaped curve. People who are in the center of the curve, and I'll be showing more of this as we go along, people who are in the center of the curve and it's the tallest, that's where most people are. Well, so supposing I take a group of people and I want to study how tall they are. And so I get a sample. I have to have a sample of people to work with. I certainly can't test everybody. And so I may say, well, let me test 3,000 people. That'll give me a broad sampling of people who are tall, people who are short, you know, all of this kind of thing. And so when I do that, then I'm going to test each one individually, but I'm going to compare them with everybody else that I have tested. And I'm going to get the majority of people in one kind of area. Then there's going to be some to the right, that's usually taller, and some to the left, that's usually shorter. This is a good way of explaining what we do with a bell-shaped curve. So let me turn to this curve again. This is the bell-shaped curve. Supposing I find that 70% of the people that I tested are 5 feet tall or close to 5 feet. That's most of them, so therefore they come in the tallest part of the curve. Now, there are going to be some people that are going to be 6 feet. There's going to be less of them. They're going to be in this section of the curve, not so many. And there are some people who might be 7.5, 8 feet tall. They're going to be down here because there's so few of them. Now, there are some people who are only going to be 4 feet tall, where the average is 5. They're going to be here, and supposedly maybe 5 feet tall, 4 feet tall, maybe some people are 3 feet tall. They're going to get in this narrow area. And so you can actually graph that out. Most people would be the average. So the average is going to come to the center. Greater than average, if you want to use a plus, is going to be on the right side, and less than average is going to be on the left side. And that's also true of intelligence. So let me take this down. Supposing, I'm not sure how much time I've got left to do this, but at any rate, so now we're still working with a study of height. And what we're doing is we're doing a bar graph. A graph is just with these little checkered lines, and the bars are here where I've drawn them. So I check with people and find out how tall they are. Most people are going to be 5 feet tall. This would be, if this is a graph, right where this whole section here, this is a bar graph, is going to be right here. 7 feet tall will be right here. There's less of them. And 8 feet down here, there's less of that, but practically nobody. 4 feet will be here, that's less than the average, and 2 feet, let's say if there were people that were 2 feet tall, over here. So you have these bar graphs. So what do? You put a dot right in the middle, and then from the dot, I do want to finish with a little bit of this. From the dot, you start drawing lines connecting the dots, and what have you got? You really have got your bell-shaped curve. 5 feet, 6 feet, 7 feet, this is the graph, the bar graph, you connect the dots, 8 feet, 4 feet, 3 feet, and 2 feet. And you connect them up, and the one with the most is going to be at the highest point. The ones that are greater than are going to be on the right hand. Those that are and the less than is going to be on the left hand. Well, what you can do with that, you can also do with IQ. Because how many people are average, how many people are above average, how many people are less than average, not quite up to average, and you can shape a bar-shaped curve, a bell-shaped curve from a bar graph on IQ. So I'm going to close it here. We'll be doing that next time, working with IQ more and how it's measured. And so we'll close it here. Please join me next time.